Welcome to the Early Edge NFL Player Prop Show, brought to you by BetMGM, the sportsbook born in Vegas. I am your host, Eric Cohen. I want to say this. I just want to apologize right off the bat. I was the one that brought down the records of the guys on the show last week, and I went 2-2. Jake, let's see. I mean, look at this. Proppy, 4-1. Uncle Dave, 4-1. Me, 2-2. So we went from a collective 80% to 71% because of me. So I apologize, but this is why we have the two best experts for this show. Let's bring him in right now. He's the best prop bettor on the planet, in my opinion, and he changes sportsbook lines. You don't believe me? Well, you try it out yourself and see what happens. It is the one and only Propstarz. And then we have the smartest fantasy football mind on the planet, who, when I try to make trades in my league, they send me his article, not knowing that I do a show with him, to reject my offers. It is Dave Richard from CBS. It's true. Uncle Dave from CBS Sports Fantasy Football. You can hear him on Fantasy Football Today, the very popular podcast that is streamed all over the world. All right, gentlemen, congratulations. Awesome week. Uncle Dave, week one, it was rough for you. You came back before the week two show and said, I'm going to dominate, and look what you've done the last 2 weeks.
I'm glad you paid attention to that. Usually people don't listen to what I say, but it's been nice to get back to basics. You'll notice in weeks 2 and 3, I didn't mess around with weird props, with fringe players. I'm sticking with guys that play a lot, and there's a realistic expectation of what they can or cannot do. And I think it's working out for me. So I would recommend that if anybody's out there and they're playing with player props, play the guys you know and play the guys who are going to play a lot. And then the last thing, and I like to say this on every episode, EC, is you don't have to take every bet we make. Take the ones that strike a chord with you, that make sense to you. Back those, and only those. Keep the number real small. You don't want to bet in large quantity because you will lose in large quantity.
Proppy, I just want to give you a quote from the first part of our chat on the YouTube page here from Lori. It says, Proppy and Uncle Dave are the best in the business. Wouldn't miss this show no matter what. I mean, I agree with that, but you guys lately have been catching fire. Tell me about the lines that you start to see. And you went over this after week one, during week one, and then after. What are the types of lines that you see the differences and the ways we can take advantage of it?
Yeah, first and foremost, shout out to Lori. Shout out to the chat. What's up? Love to see the recap screen. Certainly a sign of things to come. Did not get off to an ideal start for me personally here, so I'm hope to have things pointed in the right direction and build on some forward momentum. But yeah, looking good here. I love this week of props. I would say so far, as far as like my personal feelings towards the lines, I'm finding more inefficiencies this week than I have in previous weeks. So that is certainly a strong indicator. And this is the point of the season where I'm going to see peak volume from a betting standpoint, because of the fact that I feel there's just the most value to be had, the largest inefficiencies to be had. The books are still primarily playing catch up, especially when it comes to young players, rookie players, unproven players, or situations that are sort of still developing. So there's still a tremendous amount of opportunity, or as Dave and I and UEC would say, opportunity right now in the market. Again, as the season progresses, the lines become tighter and tighter. But I would say right now is really just the best time to be primarily a prop bettor. So absolutely love this week, and I think we're going to find some really great spots to take advantage of.
If you are live with us right now, the great Sia Najad is in the chat, so please make sure, ask some questions to him or to us. We'll try to get in as many as we can on this program. He is a genius when it comes to anything, especially golf picks, NFL, you name it, except when he bashes my U of A Wildcats. Tisk, Sia, that's all I have to say. All right, Uncle Dave, before we get going, I want to ask you about a couple injuries. We normally will talk about this throughout the show. Davante Adams out. Chris Olave hurt in practice today with a hamstring injury. Any thoughts on those two and anything else that comes to mind?
I don't know anything about the Olave injury. If I get some information on it before the show's over, I will share it with you guys. With Davante being out, listen, it's never a good thing when a player gets hurt midweek. So Wednesday practice goes by and they're totally fine. Thursday comes around and then there's that limited tag. It pops out of nowhere. It's something that you have to keep an eye on, and that's just a tip over the course of the season. In the case of Davante Adams, we're talking about a soft tissue injury that could linger on. It's a hamstring, right? Am I crazy, or is that what it is?
I believe that's it. Correct.
Okay. If it's something not soft tissue, then forget about what I'm about to say. But if it's a soft tissue injury, this is an older wide receiver, that could be problematic for down the line. If you're looking for someone that can benefit from his absence in fantasy, Jacoby Myers comes to mind, but he's already rostered in a ton of leagues. So is Brock Bowers. I would think that we'll see more opportunity down for the Las Vegas Raiders, and we'll see how it goes. But for now, Devontae Adams is not going to be a part of fantasy lineups. You're going to have to make some changes.
Proppy.
Do want to point out that in regards to Brock Bowers is a guy that I personally missed on as far as fantasy is concerned. Best ball DFS. I wish I had more exposure to Brock Bowers, obviously in redraft, especially here. I thought it was probably the worst possible landing spot for him, considering the draft capital of Michael Mayer, considering that's just not a team that's looking to throw the football very much. But Brock Bowers really proved to be an absolutely elite prospect, and thus far just been very encouraged by what I've seen. Michael Mayer will be out for this game as well, setting Brock Bowers up for just absolutely monster route participation, which wasn't the case last week. Inexplicably, I think he ran routes on only about 60% of dropbacks, which is just should never be that low for a player of his talent, but he should be out there for every single drop back, 100% route participation in what is a good matchup as well. And he has proven to have just a massive ceiling. So he's someone I'm waiting to see what the lines are when they're gonna populate, because he's someone I've got my eye on very closely. I feel he has a great shot to be fantasy's #1 overall tight end in week 4.
Uncle Dave, one more that we missed that was pointed out in the chat, the Eagles situation. Devontae Smith is out. A.J. Brown, questionable. I mean, I don't know who else they have to throw to. Is there? I know we don't have any Eagles props for, anybody that you guys recommend. I'll start with you, Dave, and then Poppy, if you jump in from there.
So we will see Jahan Dotson play a lot on the outside. He's basically their #3 receiver anyway. But in the slot without Devontae Smith there, that's a role that's probably going to go to Paris Campbell. It will be better for Paris Campbell if A.J. Brown doesn't play. But when I say better, I'm thinking like 3 catches for 30 yards, something like that against Tampa Bay. We want A.J. Brown to play for very obvious reasons. We'll probably get the word on him on Sunday, but that's a dude that needs like 1 day of practice and he'll be good to go. So fingers crossed that we'll have A.J. Brown.
Proppy, break down your Eagles.
A.J. Brown was seen today stretching, so I am encouraged. He is a very tough individual, and he is capable of playing hurt and being productive, has been in the past. But this Eagles wide receiver group behind Devontae Smith and behind A.J. Brown is simply lackluster. Jahan Dotson is coming off of 85% and 89% route participation and just basically mustered 0 production. Obviously, he's assimilating to a new situation, a new coordinator, a new quarterback as well, an entirely new offense. But that is not good for Jahan Dotson, considering the opportunity that he should seemingly have here. It's also a great matchup on paper as well against a Tampa Bay defense that's been a pretty significant pass funnel as well. So it looks like it could be just a healthy amount of Dallas Goedert. I mentioned the tantalating upside of a Brock Bowers. Dallas Goedert, as we see in possesses similar upside when Devontae Smith and A.J. Brown are not on the field. So he could be in line for an absolute monster day there, and certainly will be Jalen Hurts' primary pass catcher as well, I believe.
All right, so let's get into the props. And, in the league that I share with all of you, that I'm in with all of you and producer Jake, I have Garrett Wilson and A.J. Brown were my first 2 picks. So we just talked about A.J. Brown. It's fitting that Garrett Wilson comes up. Proppy, you're going to start us off with the first prop of the week, Garrett Wilson.
What's interesting is, I don't want to spoil Dave's pick, but it would seem on the surface that we're on opposite sides here, which I don't actually believe is the case. I believe there's actually a path to Dave and I both cashing our props. I say that pretty confidently as well, and I'll explain why without revealing Dave's pick. But I'm going over Garrett Wilson, 4.5 receptions in this matchup. It's been a slow start for Garrett Wilson truthers. We saw how just great his upside was, considering the quarterback play that he's had since entering the league. Then you give him Aaron Rodgers, who at the very least is an above-average starter at this point in his career. So it was seemingly not a stretch to assume that Garrett Wilson would be an absolutely elite-level producer. Hasn't been the case thus far in the early parts of the season, but I still think there's plenty to be encouraged by, and I think that their combination is only going to strengthen and their chemistry is going to grow as the season progresses. I look at this matchup actually as a +1 for quite a variety of reasons. First and foremost, this Broncos defense is good. They also have a very good pass rush, and not only do they have a good pass rush, they're getting quick pressure. That bodes well for Garrett Wilson, and I'll explain why. Aaron Rodgers is getting rid of the football very quickly. I believe he ranks 4th or 5th in some of the key metrics as far as how quickly he's getting rid of the football, which will help him in this matchup. When he's getting rid of the football, he is locking on quickly. He is locking on to Garrett Wilson. Garrett Wilson has a 33% target share when Aaron Rodgers is forced to get rid of the football quickly, which he has to in this matchup against Denver. Because again, they have an elite pass rush, and they're forcing quarterbacks to get rid of the ball quickly. So I actually think this is a spot where we're going to see a lot of volume for Garrett Wilson, and he could easily end up with a lot of catches close to the line of scrimmage. However, I don't think Rodgers is going to have the time. He also, without Morgan Moses, their starting right tackle, coupled with this Denver's pass rush, to really allow the routes to develop. So again, when he's looking to get rid of the ball quickly, it's primarily going to Garrett Wilson. Considering this number is 4.5, it's a significant discount because we've had minimal production to start the season, or at least it's been a bit of a disappointment for Garrett Wilson. So I look at this as a plus matchup, despite this Broncos defense certainly seeming to be legitimate. It's yet to be seen how much Vance Joseph will dial up the blitz against Aaron Rodgers. So far, Denver leads the NFL in blitz rate, even over the Minnesota Vikings. So the defense has been very solid, but I really believe this is a matchup where we're going to see Garrett Wilson get a lot of short and intermediate passing volume, and as a result, I'm going with a volume-based prop, which is over 4.5 receptions here.
All right, so I love how you phrase that, Proppy. Short and intermediate routes. So later in the show, I'll opine on what I think about that. But Uncle Dave, you have a prop that relates to that. Tell us.
It's Garrett Wilson under 21.5 yards for his longest reception, and the juice is -115 from everybody at BetMGM. And we know that Wilson's playing Denver. And this is something that he's taking on top shutdown cornerback Patrick Surtain. It's expected that Surtain will follow Garrett Wilson, just as Surtain has done against a number of other wide receivers this year, such as Mike Evans last week. He had 17 yards. George Pickens in week 2, he had 29 yards. DK Metcalf in week 1, he had 29 yards. That should be enough all on its own to convince you on Garrett Wilson. But if you watched the Jets game last week, and Propstarz mentioned this too, Garrett Wilson and Aaron Rodgers just weren't on the same page. And I expect that to be fixed down the line. But I bet there's a target or two that comes his way that just will not connect because they're not on the same page. And let's talk about that average depth of target for Garrett Wilson. On the season, and basically this is a week-to-week stat, it's around 9 yards. So he's not getting those deep downfield plays. It means that if he's going to break this prop, if he's going to go over it, it means he's going to have to do it with yards after the catch. And Patrick Surtain does not allow a lot of yards after the catch. He has 5 deep targets this year. 2 of them he's caught, only 1 of them for 22 or more yards. The longest play that Patrick Surtain has allowed this year, 16 yards. So we're betting on the Broncos. We're betting on Surtain. Garrett Wilson under 21.5 yards, longest reception.
I like it, Uncle Dave. All right, Proppy, you were going to stick with the number 1 receiver theme and go to Houston. Now, Jacksonville's secondary is a disaster, and Uncle Dave last week touted Nico Collins. He nailed it. This week, you're on Nico. Tell us.
2 words for this matchup for Nico Collins: thermonuclear. This could be an absolute eruption for Nico Collins, who I would put at this point as one of the 5 best wide receivers in the NFL. The statistics certainly back that up. The underlying metrics absolutely back that up. He had a fantastic year last year, a true breakout campaign from an efficiency standpoint. It was off the charts. This year, he has been even better. He has been absolutely phenomenal. Now he gets a matchup against a Jacksonville Jaguars team that ranks near the bottom in pass rush, completely just lacks the ability to get quick pressure as well. That's going to allow those routes to develop down the field. On top of that, they play man coverage more than any other defense in the NFL at a 61% rate. They also double team opposing wide receivers at the lowest rate in the NFL this season. We saw Tyreek Hill have an 81-yard reception in week 1 on single coverage. And then on top of all that, Tank Dell will be out for this game. So that could result in a bump in usage and targets for Nico Collins. If Jacksonville can push Houston into a pass-heavy game environment, I think he has 200-yard upside. So if you're looking for a potential laddering opportunity, again, that's things going best case scenario. But if you're looking for a potential laddering opportunity, this is it. Nico Collins could go absolutely bonkers in this matchup. To me, this number is significantly closer to his floor at 80.5. There's a 77 in the marketplace right now. So if you're a SportsLine subscriber, you will know that that's floating out there. But obviously, I'm comfortable with this at 80.5. I'd play this up to 85.5 personally. I expect this to close higher as we get closer to kickoff here. But Nico Collins has just been absolutely phenomenal. He's going to see minimal double coverage. He's going to see a ton of man coverage where he has been just outright dominant versus a team that lacks a pass rush. So I cannot emphasize this enough. This one checks every single box and then some.
Wow. When you say 200 yards on a ladder, it automatically, I mean, if you're like me in the audience, gets your attention.
That is best case scenario. I'm just saying that he has that sort of upside. I mentioned that being the case with Malik Neighbors previously in certain matchups, and this applies here to Nico Collins.
All right, so Uncle Dave, a guy that does not have 200-yard upside, let's be honest, but still has been pretty darn consistent thus far this season, is Darnell Mooney. Which way are you playing his props this week?
Why doesn't he have 200-yard upside, EC?
Do I trust Kirk Cousins to throw for that many yards? This is Bijan Robinson time.
Okay. No, he does not have 200-yard upside, but maybe he's got 90-yard upside. But we're not talking about the yardage. We're talking about the receptions. I'm taking the over on Darnell Mooney's receptions at 3.5. I started the week with the under in mind, to be honest with you, especially after Mooney went over 4 receptions last week. He had 8 catches, but only 3 or fewer in the first 2 games. So I'm thinking to myself, all right, Darnell Mooney's going to come back down to earth. He's not going to be as good. Tanked him in my rankings. Like, you couldn't even find him on the website. My initial worry was that Atlanta's depleted offensive line wouldn't be able to protect Kirk Cousins for those downfield throws. But Mooney's role changed in week number 3. The first 2 weeks of the season, his ADOT was like 13 yards. Last week, it was 3 yards. 3 yards, that's it. What kind of an ADOT is that? Well, it's one that we can benefit from. And it's one that the Falcons use, changing his role so that he's getting passes behind the line of scrimmage or at the line of scrimmage, maybe just past the line of scrimmage. It's crazy how it worked out. He had 5 targets thrown forward, but behind the line of scrimmage, including the very first play of the game. And now that both center Drew Dahlman and right tackle Caleb McGarry, they're out last week. They're going to be out this week. They're going to be out for a while. But going back to that week 3 matchup, after they left, Mooney still had 5 targets in the game, including 3 of those easy ones. I don't think his role is going to change. I think they're going to keep it right where it is. Kirk Cousins has to get the ball out quickly, and Darnell Mooney is a candidate for 4 or 5 catches in this game.
Fair enough. Don't hate that at all. Go ahead, Proppy.
Just wanted to piggyback on something Dave said that I thought was really interesting that I wanted to touch on. Dave said he initially looked at this kind of from the vantage point or the scope of thinking under. I find personally when I attack plays with that mindset, for instance, I'm looking at a guy who I think in the matchup or whatever data is kind of pointing me in one direction, and I come in there with that idea in mind, and then when I really break down or crunch the numbers, I come out on the other side. I tend to find that those plays have a very high success rate. So I just wanted to point that out from a strategical standpoint for you, anyone who's soft capping or doing this. I just find that when you come in looking at something from a specific direction and then your lens widens as you absorb more information, you come out the other side. I think that's a very a strong indicator that you're onto something.
Dave.
I would add that usually when I find something that changes my mind, I back off of it. This is one time, and not the only time, but one time where I looked at it, maybe the first one this year, where I looked at it, saw the data and went, oh man, I was way off base here. Let's go in the other direction. And so that's what we're doing here. Hopefully it pays off.
Our guy Big Cheesy in the chat said something that we should all remember going forward. He said, when Proppy runs out of breath during his take, auto tail. I probably would agree with that. Remember that going forward. All right, Proppy, you're getting another chance.
Going nuclear.
Nuclear. Yes, that's right. All right. So Proppy, you text me once a week. You'll give me a play that I really like this play. You texted me this week. You're like, this needs to get up on the site immediately. It's going to skyrocket. It's Dalton Kincaid time in Baltimore.
It is indeed, EC. Yeah, I'm going back to the well with Dalton Kincaid, who we backed last week. Backing him again here, over 38.5 receiving yards. I actually love this matchup against Baltimore for Kincaid. First and foremost with Dalton Kincaid, again, it's been a somewhat slow start to Dalton Kincaid, but I think a lot of that can get chalked up to Buffalo simply not being pushed. We've just seen minimal passing volume from this Buffalo offense. They've had a big lead in basically all three of their football games. That's resulted in just minimal passing volume in the second half. And then we saw last week, but the starters weren't even playing very much in the second half as a result of how good they've been. This actually looks like a matchup where we could see Buffalo and Josh Allen get pushed a bit against Baltimore. Baltimore secondary has been absolutely porous. This looked like a strength of theirs heading into the year, but they have been just dismal. They've been exceptionally generous to opposing tight ends this year. They've given up 290 yards to the position through 3 weeks. That's the most yards in the NFL besides only the Kansas City Chiefs here. So I look at this as a very strong potential spike week for Dalton Kincaid. We saw Brock Bowers go 9 for 90 plus against them. We saw Jake Ferguson have the big week against them last week as well. Kansas City in week 1, the combination of Travis Kelce and Noah Gray both had strong games against Baltimore. So this looks like a spot where we could see Josh Allen attempt 30 plus passing attempts against a Baltimore secondary that's been dismal. They've really struggled covering the middle of the field. They've really been vulnerable to opposing tight ends. I watched Dalton Kincaid. He just passes the eye test to me, which is why I'm so high on him as a player. He's just such a fluid route runner. I love the way they deploy him. Also encouraged by the fact that when the first drive and the first half and the second half and the plays are designed, they're looking at Kincaid a lot as well. So I just think the best of Dalton Kincaid is yet to come. When we see Josh Allen have to air the ball out because we're looking at a neutral or trailing game script, Dalton Kincaid is really going to be a big beneficiary, and I expect him to be the primary pass catcher in this matchup against Baltimore, which again looks very good to me.
Going to roll with this with Big Cheesy again in the chat. He says, it's great to be a SportsLine member. Get these plays at the numbers that are listed here before the public spikes it. That's correct. This Dalton Kincaid one, based on what Proppy said, Nico Collins, some of the other ones that Dave's talked about, get them while you can before they go up. That's the benefit of watching live or well before Sunday. Just want to point that out. All right, my turn to give a pick for a show. Last week, Proppy talked about Marvin Harrison Jr. Well, this is the Arizona Cardinals portion of the program. So let's talk about MHJ. I'm going over 66.5 receiving yards. You can find that minus 115. This is the highest totaled game of the week. Our AI model has this at over 86 yards. And number one receivers are just annihilating the Commanders right now. I mean, Mike Evans crushed them 60 yards and 2 touchdowns. Malik Neighbors over 100 yards and a touchdown. Jamar Chase last week, 100 plus yards and 2 touchdowns. So I'm also taking Harrison Jr. to score an anytime touchdown. This one on some books is minus 140, but I found it at even money. So you want to take a look at that as well. No Trey McBride equals more targets for MHJ. His targets have gone in week 1 from 3 to week 2, 8 to week 3, 11. So going in the right direction. And he is second in the league in end zone targets. I expect him to be targeted early and often, and he will score again against this porous Washington secondary. So I am going with MHJ. Now, Proppy, you're going to have another wide receiver prop of another player in this game, obviously from the Cardinals, I would have thought, Michael Wilson, but you're going to go even more savvy than that.
Yeah, I'm looking at Greg Dortch. By the way, I do want to mention I really do like the Marvin Harrison look quite a bit. And I think both of these props are more than capable of cashing in. But I'm going over 36.5 receiving yards for the slot man, Greg Dortch. Greg Dortch has been solid. Basically, when Greg Dortch is on the field, he draws a very healthy amount of targets. He doesn't have elite route participation, runs about 66% of the routes, but I expect a bump this week, and I'll explain why. And I expect even potentially a larger target share. As you mentioned, no Trey McBride. He has been the security blanket for Kyler Murray. He primarily operates, or he's been operating close to the line of scrimmage in the intermediate portions of the field. Guess who else operates in those portions of the fields who also draws a lot of targets? Greg Dortch. So without Trey McBride on the field, he's going to be the guy that Kyler Murray looks to move the chains and to pick up, yards on third down, those tough yards. Kyler Murray has been phenomenal this year. This Cardinals passing attack has been highly efficient. Now they get the mouth-watering matchup, as you mentioned, the highest projected total on this week's slate. That is the Washington Commanders. Dead last in drop-back success percentage. So this is a matchup that they can really take advantage of. The one thing that Washington, interestingly enough, has been good at is defending the splash zone. That is the deep middle of the field. They allow a lot in the middle early or close to the line of scrimmage, again, where the slot man is primarily operating out of. So without Trey McBride on the field in a matchup that really bodes well for him, I think we see Greg Dortch being utilized quite a bit. I think we see a bump in his usage. I think we see him run some additional routes. And I think he ends up with 5 to 8 targets in this matchup that should see a lot of passing volume. So I love his chances of going over 36.5 receiving yards. Also love him over 3.5 receptions, but you're paying quite a bit more juice there.
Dave, I want to ask you about this Cardinals passing game. Elijah Higgins, it looks to be the replacement for Trey McBride, and you have him at number 24 on your fantasy football rankings at CBSSports.com. Could he be worthy of a prop bet as his line gets out there this weekend?
Do we have any idea of what that line is? I would take a stab at it if we don't have one.
I'll take a look as you talk here and see if it's out there. I didn't see one earlier, but we'll see if they've come up with something here.
I mean, if you could get the over on like 1.5 receptions and it's not too juicy, I'd consider it. I can't expect Elijah Higgins to be a 1-to-1 replacement for Trey McBride. I don't think it works that way. I think it's going to be much more of the receivers, like Rock and Roll High School said. It's going to be Dortch. It's going to be Michael Wilson. They're going to pick up the slack for Trey McBride not playing in the game. So I would look at that. And I would also, so I remember looking at these props earlier for this game, and there were a lot of numbers that seemed a little low to me on the passing side. And it makes me think that maybe the odds makers believe that the running backs are going to have a significant role in this game. We know that James Conner can catch. He could end up being somebody that takes work away from Trey McBride or actually helps replace Trey McBride. But it'll be a piecemeal thing where Dortch, who is the slot guy, works the middle of the field. He'll get in there. Wilson is the size guy on the perimeter, and then Conner out of the backfield as well. All these guys can pitch in. And I don't know how much that leaves for Elijah Higgins.
Proppy, and thank you for that. His line is not out, Dave, that I saw. Proppy, I saw Dortch's line.
There it is, 1.5.
We just made it, 1.5 catches. Yeah. Dortch's line is up to 39.5 in some places. How high would you go?
Up to 42.5. Again, comfortable playing this. I think his receptions line will close at 4.5. I expect his receiving line to close at like 43.5.
All right, it's time for our weekly kicker prop. And, of course, we're going to stick with the Cardinals theme. How about Matt Prater over 1.5 made field goals at -125? So he's made 2 field goals in each game this year. That's a good start. Washington's given up 3 field goal attempts against Tampa Bay in week 1 and 3 against Cincinnati in week 3. We're just going to ignore the Giants in week 2 because the Giants, are the Giants, albeit last night Greg Joseph kicked a lot of them. Washington surrendered multiple field goal attempts in 10 of 17 last year, gave up 35 made field goals, and plus this game has big-time shootout potential, as Proppy and I have discussed. So we're rolling with Matt Prater as our pick. We'll have something against Tennessee on Monday night on the Monday night preview show, but let's just stick for now to Matt Prater on Sunday over 1.5 field goals. All right, you can bet all of these props and more at BetMGM, and they have an awesome promotion going on right now. We've all had our first touchdown bet called back before, and BetMGM is giving you a second chance. With BetMGM's Pro Football Second Chance, place any first touchdown scorer bet, and if your player doesn't score first but scores second, get your entire stake back in cash. No opt-in required. Here's how it works. Place a pregame straight first touchdown scorer bet in any NFL game. If your player scores the first touchdown, great. You win your wager as normal. If your player scores the second touchdown in the game, you'll get your stake back in cash. It's that simple. Log in to BetMGM for more details. Coming up next, let's talk about running backs here on the Friday NFL Prop Show.
CBS Sports HQ, giving you college football coverage unlike anyone else.
We're talking Big Ten.
Pre- and post-game coverage.
Are you encouraged with the way that this team responded?
Along with breaking news.
A lot of movement in the rankings this week.
Highlights and expert analysis.
That streak could be in jeopardy here.
Sure. What was your main takeaway from this game? How impressive was his domination?
That really changed the football game.
Let's go ahead and have some more fun.
Another wild ending.
The chaos continues.
Turn to CBS Sports HQ.
So when we're going through the props at the beginning of the show, Proppy says, hey, before we start the show, I want to take a look at all the props. And he looks at one on the board and he goes, oh, that is a winner. Uncle Dave, let's start with the running backs. And Proppy's favorite team, the Philadelphia Eagles.
It's probably why he likes it, is because it's somebody.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Who would it be? Would it be Kenneth Gainwell? Of course not. Could it be Jalen Hurts? Yeah, maybe, but it's not. It's Saquon Barkley. Sometimes you've just got to keep things simple. Saquon over 75.5 rush yards, minus 117. He's been over this in 3 games with the Eagles, as Prop will tell you. And we know the Eagles will be without at least one key wide receiver on Sunday, maybe 2. So we're talking about a very necessary part of this Philadelphia offense. Tampa Bay's run defense won't be at full strength. We know that Kalijah Kancey hasn't played in a game yet this season. Vita Vea, if he is somehow out, this makes this prop a slam dunk, but he practiced all week. He's been limited. He's questionable for the game. I would suspect that he plays, but this is Saquon Barkley that we're talking about, and we know he'll get the work. We know he's capable of maximum damage. And just in case you're worried about how the Eagles' O-line will operate without right tackle Lane Johnson, you should know that Barkley averaged 9.6 yards per carry last week without Lane Johnson. That was in a tougher matchup against the Saints, and that was with 3 of his 14 runs, Sans Johnson, going at least 11 yards. Saquon will get you at least 80, and you might even be able to ladder this one because he's been over 100 in 2 of 3 games.
Proppy, what I know, go ahead. I know you want to touch on Saquon. Yep.
Love this matchup for Saquon. Just want to point out how spectacular Saquon has been. I believe he's on pace. I saw a statistic, or I read a statistic earlier this morning, for over 600 rush yards over expected. Just to put that number into perspective, his breakout rookie season, which was by far his most efficient and productive year, I think he had something like 350 rushing yards over expected. So he has been just monstrous for this Eagles offense. And then again, without potentially Devontae Smith and A.J. Brown in there, he should have an elite workload. And the results have just been sensational.
Proppy, one thing I know about you, when I see your props on this show, I expect to see a lot of unders. Now, we saw a lot of overs in terms of receivers, but now it's time for an under when it comes to running backs. And so this is interesting because on the Rams, everybody's hurt. I mean, Cooper Kupp's out, Puka Nakua's out. The offensive line's a disaster. So Kyren Williams, what do we expect of him in Chicago this week?
Yeah, it's been interesting for Kyren Williams. I expect him to struggle. I'm going under 77.5 rushing yards for Kyren Williams for a variety of reasons. You mentioned one key one, EC. That has been this Rams offensive line. They have been absolutely dreadful, also experiencing multiple injuries as well, just not opening up holes for Kyren Williams here, who himself has been dreadfully inefficient. The workload has been absolutely elite. He survives on elite usage in the red zone as well. I believe he leads the NFL this season in red zone touches. He's cashed that in for 4 rushing touchdowns, which is tied for first with Saquon in the league right now. So certainly he's been productive from a fantasy standpoint. But again, the efficiency has been dreadful. Last season, he paired good efficiency with elite usage. The usage is still there, but again, the efficiency has completely fallen off, which is somewhat of a result, again, of this Rams offensive line not being good. Also, the passing game not being able to get going without Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua. Also, this matchup against Chicago, the Chicago defense is legitimate. They're very good against the run as well. They rank in the top 10 in nearly every defensive rushing metric here. So I expect this to be a struggle for him on the ground. Again, I still think he's going to be, he's a start in fantasy because of that red zone usage, because he's utilized in the passing game. But from a purely rushing standpoint, I just think this is 5 to 7 yards too high, particularly in this matchup against the Bears. I also could see a scenario while the Bears have been disappointing, more on that shortly, where they're playing from behind and the Rams aren't able to run the football maybe as much as they want to. I see his rushing line, his attempts is 18.5. I like the under there, but I really like this under of 77.5 rushing yards for Kyren Williams.
Uncle Dave, you're going to be very disappointed in me. In my main fantasy league last week, I just figured Aaron Jones in week 2 was not impressed. He fumbled. There's Ty Chandler. So I traded him straight up for Rachaad White. A big mistake. And now I see your prop. I know. I know. This is why I can't help myself. Sometimes I get trade happy. And then I see your prop this week and I just shake my head even more.
What a knucklehead move. What, you saw Aaron Jones fumble and you decided to turn him into the guy who might be like the number 2 running back in Tampa?
I mean, I thought, okay, Ty Chandler's going to get more of a shot there in Minnesota, and maybe White holds off Bucky Irving. You know, maybe the first 2 weeks are a fluke, and not so much.
Proppy. How good is it that we're in a league with EC?
Oh, it's great. It is great. I'm in multiple leagues with EC, Dave. So.
Oh, you're doing better than me.
I will say, in one league, the top 2, Propstarz 1, EC's parlay special 2. I just want to point that out. One of them right now. It's early, but we're both undefeated.
So for those that don't know, every week I produce a piece of content called the Trade Chart, where I give values to every notable player in the National Football League. And you use that to help make a trade. EC, that would have helped you not make that deal. And you wouldn't be floating.
I read it.
Full of regret.
If I told you other trades I made last week, you'd be even sicker. I get trade happy. It happened.
I get trade happy too, but I don't get moronic about it. So here's what I want you to do. For the next 45 seconds or so, I want you to cover your ears while I tell everybody else about my favorite Aaron Jones prop of the week. And it's also my favorite prop of the week. It's Aaron Jones over 57.5 rushing yards, minus 111. BetMGM giving us a solid. He has sped past this total in each of the 2 games where he hasn't gotten hurt in and didn't fumble in. And it's fair to point out that he did struggle against the game against 49ers. He fumbled, got hurt, etc. EC turned him into mush, whatever. That's a tough run defense. The Packers, on the year, they've allowed 5 yards per rush to running backs, mainly through the work of Saquon Barkley and Jonathan Taylor. And I know that you might think, well, those guys are awesome. Saquon Barkley, Jonathan Taylor, they're studs. I believe Jones deserves to be in the company of those running backs this year. All 3 of these guys have averaged 5.1 or more yards per carry on the season. All 3 are over 5.1 yards per carry on first down runs. Jones actually is the best rushing average against 8 in the box, a ridiculous 6.6 yard per carry average in that situation. Jones has the largest yards after contact per rush at 4.02 yards. 4 yards after contact he's averaging. That's sick. He also has the highest avoided tackle rate of the group. I think this Vikings offense can and will run the ball. Jones in a revenge game should get the numbers necessary to make this an easy prop. It's my favorite one of the week, and I even would ladder this one up to 80 yards. You can get Jones at 80-plus rush yards at plus 220. EC, go ahead. Take your hands off your ears.
I don't know what to say anymore. Dave, I'm never trading with you. I can't. No, I'm just kidding.
You didn't trade with me. Because
I will never trust myself in a trade with you or Proppy. Well, I did make one trade with Proppy, and it was, it's helped me. In that league, I'm 3-0 with him, so okay. It's worked out for both of us. With the
trade chart, use it. Use the trade chart.
Here's the problem. I love the trade chart. You have Bijan too low, in my opinion. That was my one thing about it.
So it validates the whole trade chart.
That's why I was like, yes, Bijan low. I can't do no. If I told you that I traded Malik Neighbors last week for Brandon Ayuk and Sam Laporta, yeah, it was not. It's not good, guys.
That's not terrible, EC.
Honestly, I don't think that's nearly as bad as the other trade that you made.
Agreed.
Well, one guy I do have on that team that I am stumping for this week is Chuba Hubbard. And I'm playing his over 80.5 rushing and receiving yards at minus 115. It's a high total game against a terrible Cincinnati defense, who, by the way, I thought would be good this year. They absolutely stink. The Bengals are without 2 starting interior defensive linemen. So I say, okay, Chuba had a huge game last week. Had over 150 combined yards rushing, receiving. He's averaging 5.2 yards per carry. He's caught 9 of 10 targets over his last 2, and he's averaging more than 15 touches a game. And we saw that Ramondre Stevenson had 126 combined yards, and his Isaiah Pacheco 111 combined yards in the first 2 games against Cincinnati. So I'm all about this prop until I put it, in our pregame, the itinerary. And Uncle Dave leaves me a note, and he says, "Are you sure about that one?" So, Uncle Dave, why should I not be sure about Chuba, who I'm having hopefully save my team this week?
So, first of all, full disclosure, he's a top 15 running back for me in my rankings. I think he should have another very good week. He is the main catalyst of this Carolina offense, and I think that Andy Dalton has breathed life into it. So, I don't think it's out of the question that he can't get over this, but their offensive line incurred a little bit of damage this week. There's a chance both starting guards are out for the game. And there's something to be said about Cincinnati being 0-3 back against the wall. They need to put up some huge numbers. I'll talk about this when we get to my Zach Moss prop. In fact, forget about it. You see, I'm just going to tell you about my Zach Moss prop right now. I think Zach Moss is going to go over 12.5 rush attempts. The juice is a little high at minus 128. I would also play over 13.5 rush attempts at even money or close to it, but I would prefer to pay the vig. They want you on this under so bad. Moss is maxed out at 12 carries per game so far this season, but this figures to be a matchup where the Bengals might be able to win without Joe Burrow having to throw 35 times. Again, like I was saying, a back against the wall matchup. If Cincinnati falls to 0-4 and one of the losses is against the Carolina Panthers, that the season is a wash for the Bengals. It's going to be very hard for them to climb uphill. It's already going to be hard for them anyway because they're 0-3. So I think that they actually get a good effort on the defensive side of the ball, and that means that the offense can run it a little bit. Moss is their best guy to do it. If we remove the win last week by Carolina, which was against the Raiders, so okay, they made the Raiders run game look terrible. They've had 3 running backs get at least 14 carries in their other 2 games. Zach Moss will be the 4th one on the season. We're taking the over on his rush attempts, and we're taking the Bengals to win that game. And I think Chuba Hubbard will be okay, but I don't love that one as much as I would have if his offensive line were healthy and if he weren't playing the Bengals.
Fair enough. Proppy, you want to opine on the Bengals and Panthers? Any thoughts there?
I would just add one point that I think that you should have mentioned, EC. May have been an omission, but Andy Dalton, I think Andy Dalton provides a big boost to that offense, actually makes the offense look functional. I do think this line is big for Chuba Hubbard personally, and I do think that we could see potentially the Bengals here rout Carolina and then force Carolina to have to throw the ball, which would potentially minimize Chuba Hubbard's rushing volume. So that would be my one point or counterpoint, I guess, to the play.
Yeah, but to be fair, if that were to happen, and if Chuba Hubbard has some modest rushing yardage when that happens, he still has a chance to go over because of his role in the passing game. And Dalton will look for him in the passing game.
And they're down Adam Thielen.
Yeah, that's a great point. And Deontay Johnson's questionable. We know he's going to play, but that's not 100%, right? So that's a great point about Andy Dalton, and that was an omission on my part. All right, Proppy, normally when it comes to passing props, I expect to see you with unders and me with overs, but sometimes life has a way of turning upside down. And so you're rolling with an over with Caleb Williams, really?
Let's turn lemons into lemonade here. Yeah, the interesting thing happened last week for Caleb Williams. It's something I actually discussed at length leading up to it. Caleb Williams had the best week of his young career, his 3-week career, while finishing as the QB 23 in EPA per dropback. So certainly some signs to be encouraged by, but that really kind of points out paints the picture for how ineffective Caleb Williams has been. The one thing I pointed out when talking about Caleb Williams prior to that matchup was he was just really lacking, or one of the things I think was really hurting the Bears passing attack was lacking another guy to step up. I had talked about Keenan Allen, not bad. The 2-week absence for him. Rome Odunze hadn't really produced. We finally saw another guy besides DJ Moore step up and have a solid game. Cole Kmet played fairly well as well. That made the Bears' passing attack a lot more functional. The running game has been absolutely dreadful. DeAndre Swift has been the worst starting running back in the NFL by a country mile thus far. But I was encouraged by Caleb Williams despite them losing the game. Now they just get an absolutely phenomenal matchup where he can build on that momentum against a Rams team that's 31st in EPA allowed per dropback. Also have been completely unable to apply pressure or quick pressure as well. So this matchup bodes very well for Caleb Williams, who finally got some additional production outside of DJ Moore from Rome Odunze. Also, Cole Kmet looked good as well. And then Keenan Allen is likely, or at least at the minimal questionable, but expected to suit up as well. So some reinforcements are coming from Caleb Williams, who showed some signs of life despite the slow start. Now gets a fantastic matchup, and we're getting a low number here at only 223.5 passing yards. And with the Bears completely unable to run the football effectively, coupled with the fact that the teams are throwing a ton all over the Rams, I look at this as a spot where we're going to see Caleb Williams have a good day, and I think it results in way more than 225 passing yards.
Dave.
I like this prop. I think he'll go over. I don't think he'll go over by a huge margin. I don't think he's going to have over 300 yards like he had last week. But the one thing I noticed when I went back and I watched this game was anytime he was calm and on schedule on a play, meaning that he wasn't trying to make an improvisational play, he wasn't nervous because the pass rush was coming on him or anything like that. When we saw him play calm football, he was really good. And I think because of that Rams pass rush being kind of a B- unit, I think we could see Caleb Williams have a week where he does throw the ball very well. Mentioning Keenan Allen is also huge. I do not hate this prop if Keenan Allen somehow does not play in the game. But having Keenan Allen back, very, very good for Caleb Williams.
Dave, real quick, which running back do you like more this week? DeAndre Swift's combined yards, 45.5. Rashawn Johnson's is 47.5. Would you take either one of those?
I'm not going to take either one of them because I still think the Bears are trying to figure out what the hell they're doing with these running backs. Here's my best guess. Actually, this isn't a guess. Shane Waldron said that Khalil Herbert is their goal line guy, which stinks for fantasy because we want to have somebody have a big role and be the goal line guy for a team. We're not getting that with the Bears. Roshan Johnson replaced Travis Homer as their passing downs back in week number 3, and I thought he did a pretty good job. I don't think it means that he's going to completely overtake DeAndre Swift, but he might take some carries here and there away from him. Herbert might too. I think if there was a play to be made, it's the under on DeAndre Swift, but it makes me nervous because Swift, despite all of his flaws this year, he still shows speed, and he could make one big play that burns that prop. So I'd stay away from those if I could help it.
Speaking of unders, I'm going Aaron Rodgers under 219.5 passing yards. We talked about it earlier. Dave put out a prop with the Garrett Wilson longest catch under 21.5. So Denver's allowed to their 3 quarterbacks they faced 171, 117, and 163 passing yards. To me, this should be a Breece Hall, Braylon Allen, and defense game. Ugly game. I like the anything under for the most part, other than proppies, Garrett Wilson catches. I do like that. Rodgers only been over this once, and that was last week, 281 yards against New England. But he has a short, he's targeting those short A-dots, game manager role. I mean, it's just we're not looking at him throwing the ball down the field over and over and over. So I could see him being under 200. That's how far down I'm willing to play this prop. I would be mildly surprised if he went over 200 yards. Just kind of a quick thought on that. All right, coming up next, we'll recap our best bets.
A Quiet Place Day 1 is now streaming on Paramount Plus. It's thrilling, terrifying. It will make your heart pound out of your chest. A Quiet Place Day 1, now streaming.
Great marketing.
Yeah, I'm telling you what, right? That was intense. All right, we have a question for you, Uncle Dave. I'll give this one to you. We haven't talked about the Chiefs and the Charger game yet. Jason Edmondson wants to know in the chat, Travis Kelce over 47.5 receiving yards. Which way are you leaning?
I don't have any evidence to suggest that you should go over on this, so it's either under or stay away. I also am getting a sense that this game is going to have a very weird game script with a lot of surprise performances in it. If you look at the Carson Steele props this week, they're designed for you to take the over on them.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think you should. I think something is afoot in Kansas City. Kareem Hunt might be somebody you want to stash on your fantasy team.
Proppy, I know this is Monday night. You and I will talk about this, I'm sure, beforehand. DK Metcalf, 62.5 yards against the Lions. Which way do you lean?
I lean over on that. I do anticipate that we'll see a solid amount of passing volume from Seattle. DK looks good. It's a good matchup for him. So, yeah, I lean over on that.
All right, let us recap the props from this week's show. Proppy is on Caleb Williams over 223.5 passing yards. Kyron Williams under 77.5 rushing yards in the same game. Garrett Wilson over 4.5 receptions. Nico Collins, one of his favorite props of the week, over 80.5 receiving yards. Greg Dortch over 36.5 receiving yards. And Dalton Kincaid, another one of his favorite props, over 38.5 receiving yards. Uncle Dave is on Aaron Jones over 57.5 rushing yards, which is pure pain for me. Saquon Barkley over 75.5 rushing yards. Zach Moss over 12.5 rushing attempts. Garrett Wilson's longest reception under 21.5 yards. And Darnell Mooney over 3.5 receptions. I am on that Aaron Rodgers under 219.5 passing yards. Chuba Hubbard over 80.5 rushing and receiving yards. Marvin Harrison over 66.5 receiving yards and to score an anytime touchdown. And then Matt Prater over 1.5 field goals. All right, Uncle Dave, your favorite proppy prop of the week is?
My favorite prop of the week is going to be the Caleb Williams over 223.5 passing yards. It's really close between that and maybe even a parlay if you can pull it off. Can you parlay Marvin Harrison's yards and the anytime touchdown? Or
you can, yes.
That?
They do.
They do.
I
think I would do that.
Okay. That's what I'm doing. Proppy, what's your favorite Uncle Dave prop of the week?
I really like the Marvin Harrison props from UEC as well, but for Uncle Dave, it would be Saquon. I love this matchup for Saquon. Expect an elite workload from him. He's been absolutely phenomenal. I expect him to carry the Eagles offense.
Uncle Dave, this is not, I know this is an NFL show, but your alma mater, who you're wearing your jacket tonight, University of Miami against Virginia Tech. How do we feel laying 17.5?
It's a lot of points to lay. I don't know anything about Virginia Tech. College football is something that I can just blissfully watch and be totally ignorant to it. I really pay more attention to it once the NFL season ends. That's when I dial in on the talent. But I've really been impressed with the Hurricanes. If you've watched Virginia Tech and you don't think their offense is really good, I think the Canes will cover. But I don't know that for a fact. Far from an official play from me, but I do like the Canes to put up yards and touchdowns.
How is Miami this year?
Really good, Proppy. Cam Ward,
incredibly good.
Yeah, quarterback Cam Ward is the favorite for the Heisman Trophy. He transferred in from Washington State. You'll look out for him in fantasy circles next year. He might be starting in the early weeks of the 2025 NFL season. All right, guys, another. What's that?
They'll look good in New York blue.
I think any other quarterback outside of Daniel Jones would. How about you? What do you say, Proppy?
I would also say for all of us guys over 30 years old, NFL and certainly college is more interesting when Miami is producing good players. So I can remember when the U was Alabama and they had like 5 to 15 players in the first round every year through the late 90s, early 2000s, and it was awesome.
Yeah, I don't know if they're that good, but I think they're college football playoff tournament good.
I will say this. If you are not necessarily the biggest college football guy, go look up the 2001 Miami roster, and you'll recognize so many names. When Frank Gore was like fourth string on that team, and Kellen Winslow Jr., who ended up being a great NFL pro before everything else, he was a backup to Jeremy Shockey. That's how good they were. Just Google that. Kind of a fun road that going down that road. All right, thanks to Brewster Jake. He does a great job with all of our shows and his contributions and making us look good. Always appreciate it. For Uncle Dave and for Proppy, I am EC. Thanks for watching, and as I always like to say, let's hit it big. Good luck.